17-year-old David Smith and his wife, Maureen, sat at the Hyde police station on October 7th, 1965. They had a very distressing story to tell Superintendent Talbot, one that would soon become one of Britain's most notorious criminal cases. The night before, David's sister-in-law came over to his house. When it was time for her to go home, she stated that she was afraid to walk alone in the dark, so David offered to accompany her. When they got to Myra's house, 16 Wardlebrook Avenue, she asked him to come inside because her boyfriend, Ian Brady, had some miniature bottles of wine for him. Once inside, he was left standing in the kitchen alone with the wine where he read the labels on the bottles. Suddenly, he heard a long, loud scream, followed by Myra calling for him from the living room. Upon entering the room, he saw Ian Brady holding a life-sized rag doll. But when it fell against the couch, 2 feet away from him, David realized it wasn't a doll. It was a young man. Welcome to another episode of Crimson Sin with Tamsin Lee. I am your host, Tamsin Lee. You can find a link to today's show notes in the description. Stay up to date with the latest from me at Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon. Also check out the Tamsin Lee shop. You can find links to all of these sites in the description. Don't forget to like and follow to keep up with the latest episodes. This is the 4th episode in the Couples Who Slay Valentine's Day Countdown. We have talked about Tyler Witt and her boyfriend. We've talked about the Ken and Barbie killers with Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. And we have discussed the case of Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. So today's case brings us to Manchester, where the infamous Moors murders occurred in the 1960s. It was the first time in British history that a woman had been involved in a killing partnership that had involved the serial sex murders of children. The public could not understand how any woman could take part in such a horrific crime, as women are known to be loving and nurturing toward children. I mean, back then, if a woman was nearby your child, you pretty much trusted them to look after the kid. This case changed that. Myra Hindley's involvement made the crimes committed with Ian Brady even more evil and unforgivable. What drove this couple to such depths of depravity? While Ian Brady's childhood gave clear indicators of his future crimes, the same could not be said about Myra's childhood. Myra was the first child of Nellie and Bob Hindley, born on July 2nd, 1942 in Gorton, Manchester. For the first 3 years of her life, her father served in a parachute regiment, so Myra's mother raised her alone during her first 3 years of life. They lived with Nellie's mother, Ellen Maybury, who helped look after the child while Nellie was at work. When Bob returned home, the family bought a house just around the corner from Nellie's mother. Bob would find a job as a laborer, but he had a hard time readjusting to civilian life and would spend most of his free time in the local bar. Their second child, Maureen, was born in August 1946. But Bob and Nellie found the workload of having jobs and 2 small children to be just too much for them. So they decided to send Myra to live with her grandmother. This arrangement solved a lot of the family's problems. For Ellen, she was no longer lonely. The pressure on Bob and Nellie was relieved, and Myra enjoyed all of the devoted attention she received from her grandmother. Psychiatrists believe that this innocent incident could have impacted Myra, as it meant that she and her father's relationship never fully developed. As Bob was not known to be an emotionally demonstrative man, his absence during Myra's formative years created a void that was never filled. And with her living away from him, it deepened that void. At 5 years old, Myra attended Peacock Street Primary School and was described as a mature and sensible girl. However, her grandmother would allow her to stay home for the smallest of things, so her attendance was poor. Due to her many absences, she did not receive the necessary grades to attend the local grammar school. So instead, she would attend Ryderbrow Secondary Modern, where her attendance was still very poor, continuing into her high school years. But she was able to consistently maintain perfect grades. While in school, she was talented in creative writing and poetry, and she loved sports and athletics. Of course, while in school, she was teased a lot. I mean, who isn't teased or bullied while at school, right? Classmates would often make fun of the shape of her nose, and she was given the nickname Square Arse because of her broad hips. While her classmates made fun of her, parents and children loved Myra. Her reputation amongst adults as being a mature and sensible girl made her a very popular babysitter when she was a teenager. Parents were just elated if they were able to have Myra as their babysitter because she was responsible and she showed genuine love for children. At 15 years old, Myra became friends with a fragile and timid 13-year-old boy named Michael Higgins. She looked after him a lot and protected the boy as if he were her younger brother. She was very close to him and knew that she had found a lifelong friend in him. One day, he invited her to go swimming at a reservoir, but she declined his offer. Myra was devastated when she learned that day he had drowned. And that grief was made all the worse by her guilt because she believed that if she had gone with him, she could have saved him. She was a strong swimmer, so she knew that if she had been there, she could have saved his life. She knew that there would have been something she could have done to prevent his death. Myra was inconsolable over the next few weeks, flip-flopping between depression and hysteria. She cried, dressed in black, went to church nightly to light a candle for her friend. And she would even go collect money from neighbors so she could purchase a wreath. She even went on to convert to Michael's religion, Roman Catholicism. While everyone grieves differently, her actions deeply troubled her family. They believed she was overreacting and told her that she needed to control herself. Not long after Michael's death, her grades suffered immensely, and she left school because she was not considered bright enough to stay or complete her O levels. Myra began work as a junior clerk at an electrical engineering firm called Lawrence, Scott & Electrometers. At this point in her adolescence, she was a lot like the other girls her age. She attended dances, went to cafes, listened to rock and roll, flirted with boys, and she would occasionally have a cigarette. Her appearance also became more important to her. She started to bleach her hair, and she also started to wear dark makeup so she could appear older. On her 17th birthday, Myra would become engaged to Ronnie Sinclair, but the reality of life soon started to creep in, and she started to question the lifestyle she would soon be expected to conform to. After marriage, you're expected to buy a house, then you're expected to have children. Then the years after would be met with trying to make ends meet while your husband spends all of the money at the local pub. She focused on the negative side of marriage, the things she witnessed growing up, and called off her engagement. But Myra began to crave something more exciting in her life. She would go on to fill out applications for the Navy and Army, but she never turned them in. Then she considered working as a nanny in America, but she never followed through with this plan. Eventually, she would search for a job in London, but again, nothing came of it. She wouldn't find that excitement she was searching for until January 1961, when Myra Hindley would meet Ian Brady. Ian Brady was born in one of the roughest slums at the time in Glasgow on January 2nd, 1938. His single mother, Margaret, she also went by Peggy Stewart, worked as a tea room waitress in a hotel. So back in this time, to be an unwed mother was met with a lot of disapproval and judgment. So she would sign her name as Mrs. Stewart to make it seem as though she was married. She would never say who Ian's father was, only stating that he was a journalist for a Glasgow newspaper who died a few months before Ian was born. Because she had no one to support her and her baby, she found it necessary that she knew it was necessary to continue working. As a single working mother, she could not afford to hire a babysitter and would sometimes leave her baby at home alone. Peggy knew this wasn't right. She did not want to have to leave her baby home alone by himself while she was at work. I mean, he was just a newborn. He was an infant. So she advertised for a permanent babysitter to take Ian into their home so they could provide her baby with the care and attention she was not able to provide him with. A couple with 4 children of their own named Mary and John Sloan answered the advertisement. To Peggy, they appeared trustworthy and caring, and at 4 months old, Ian was unofficially adopted by the Sloans. Peggy signed over Ian's welfare payments to the Sloan family and arranged to visit with him every Sunday. Every Sunday, Peggy would bring gifts to her son, but she would never tell him that she was his biological mother. Mary Sloan was referred to as Auntie or Ma, but eventually his biological mother's visits became less and less frequent, until one day they stopped altogether when Ian was 12 years old. At this age, Peggy had moved with her new husband, Patrick Brady, to Manchester. Ian always felt that he didn't truly belong due to the murky relationship with his mother and the arrangements with the Sloan family. Even though the Sloans provided the child with a loving environment, Ian didn't respond to the care and attention they provided. He would prove to be a very difficult child who often felt lonely and angry, a recipe that caused him to frequently have extreme temper tantrums that would normally end in him banging his head on the floor. Ian Brady attended Camden Street Primary School and was considered to be a bright child by his teachers. But the same could not be said about his classmates, who considered him secretive and an outsider. He did not play sports like the other boys his age, who would consider him to be a sissy. Even though he was bullied and an all-around difficult child, there is one instance from his childhood that remains profound and imprinted on the memory of Ian as well as the Sloan family. At 9 years old, Ian went out to the moors of Loch Lomond with the Sloan family, where they spent the day picnicking. After eating a filling lunch, the Sloans took a nap in the grass. When they woke up, they discovered Ian wasn't there. When they finally found him, he was standing about 500 yards away at the top of a steep slope. He stood there for an hour as the family called and whistled, trying to get his attention, but nothing they did broke Ian from his reverie. Two of the Sloan children climbed the hill to get him, but Ian told them to go on home without him. He just wanted to be alone. Later on the bus ride home, he was extremely talkative for the first time in his life. Something about that time he spent alone on that hillside provided him with a profound experience. Overlooking the vast expanse on that hillside, he was filled with a sense of power and strength. When he was 11, Ian passed his entrance exams to attend a school for students with an above-average intelligence called Shawlands Academy. However, his true potential in the academic world would never be realized because, according to his teachers, he never applied himself and started to misbehave. He would go on to start smoking, give up on his academic career, and start getting in trouble with the law. He also started to become fascinated with the Second World War, and more specifically with the Nazis. Between the ages of 13 and 16, Ian would be charged on 3 counts of housebreaking and burglary. By the third time at 16, the court decided not to give him a custodial sentence on the condition that he moved to Manchester to live with Peggy and her husband. At 16 years old, he had not seen his mother for 4 years and had never met his stepfather. Ian moved in with his mother and stepfather at the end of 1954, thrust into a home with strangers. He became even more withdrawn as he was viewed as different in the community because of his strong Scottish accent. In an attempt to gain more sense of belonging with his new family, he changed his last name from Stewart to Brady. He continued to try and fit in with his family, even though he did not get along with his stepfather, Patrick. Even so, Ian still took the job as a porter at the local market that Patrick found for him, but he still felt as though he did not truly belong, and would start to alleviate this loneliness he felt with reading. Through this venture, he discovered something exciting he could relate to within works such as Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, works from Marquis de Sade, and other novels entitled Justine, The Kiss of a Whip, and The Torture Chamber. Eventually, Ian would just pick up where he left off in his criminal career, only a year after living with his mother and stepfather. By this time, he had left his job at the market and was now working in a brewery where he was arrested for aiding and abetting. His employers had found out that he had been stealing lead seals. But this time the courts were not lenient on him and would sentence him to spend 2 years in an institution for young offenders. However, he would spend 3 months in Strangeways prison in Manchester because there were no available places to put him. Spending time in an actual prison at 17 years old taught him that he needed to toughen up, and he needed to toughen up quickly. After 3 months in an actual prison, Ian was moved to a young offenders institution in Yorkshire where he would take advantage of the lighter security. He began brewing and drinking his own alcohol and running gambling books. But he would soon find himself in a more strict institution at Hull Prison after getting into a drunken fight with a warden. While at Hull Prison, Ian actively sought out ways to learn more about the criminal way of life. His aspiration in this line of work was to make a great deal of money, become rich. And so, to prepare himself for this, he began taking courses in bookkeeping. His family noticed that he was even more silent and brooding than before after he was released in November 1957. It took him a while to find employment, and would eventually work as a laborer for 6 months. He continued to search the right angle for a criminal scheme that would make him rich. But in the meantime, he still needed to have a job. So he decided to put his bookkeeping skills to use, finding employment in 1959 with Millward's Merchandising. It was here, over a year later, that a new secretary would walk into his life. Myra and Ian's first meeting was the very definition of an immediate and fatal attraction. While others saw Ian as a gloomy character, Myra found his silent and aloof personality as enigmatic, worldly, and a sign of intelligence. To her, Ian was different from any of the boys she had ever known. She would write in her diary every night of her feverish longing for him, flip-flopping from loving him to hating him. But Ian appeared to remain disinterested. It wasn't until an office Christmas party that Ian would ask Myra out on a date. The first night, he took her out to see the movie Judgment at Nuremberg, which is a film about the Nuremberg trials, dealing with, Nazis and World War II and all of that. He would then have her listen to records of Hitler's marching songs and even encouraged her to read some of his favorite books. Myra happily consented to this undertaking. She had waited for something different and exciting for so long, and now she was experiencing it. Before long, Ian became Myra's first lover, and she was just completely obsessed with him as he spoon-fed her all of his twisted philosophical theories. She wanted nothing more in life than to please him, even allowing him to take explicit photos of her and of them having sex. The couple would spend their lunch breaks reading aloud to one another of Nazi atrocities and would become increasingly less sociable with their colleagues. Not only did Myra begin emulating an ideal of Aryan perfection, but she started dressing differently for her boyfriend as well, wearing risque clothing such as high boots, mini skirts, and leather jackets, and also wearing crimson lipstick. With her taking in all of his philosophies and ideals, Ian's ideas would become gradually more paranoid and outrageous. When he told her that there was no God, she stopped going to church. When he told her that rape and murder were not wrong, and that murder was the supreme pleasure, she did not question it. It was as if her personality had become one with his, transforming her into the female version of himself. Please continue to part 2.